Ruin My Childhood.
You're listening to Ruin My Childhood, the podcast where we decide if some things are better left in the past. I'm Kat.
I'm Mike.
And today we are talking about Darkwing Duck.
Let's get dangerous.
I mean, it's really not that dangerous. It's a children's show.
That's true.
Yeah.
From the 90s.
What do you remember about this cartoon?
Honestly, not much. I know I liked the show. I didn't have the Disney Channel, and I'm pretty sure this was a Disney Channel thing, so I think I only got to watch it during the free trial weeks.
Right.
But I definitely had a Darkwing Duck action figure. I remember there was like a rat guy with an electrical plug on his head, and then of course I remember Negaduck, who was just basically Darkwing Duck in a yellow costume, but evil.
Negaduck.
And then I remember there was a kid and some guy, like the pilot guy from DuckTales.
That's right. I really wonder how much I was actually paying attention when I watched cartoons as a kid, because this is just a blur. And I think I get my wires crossed a little bit on this one and Inspector Gadget, because they're both somewhat bumbling, and they have daughters, and they fight crime, theoretically.
Are they both bumbling? I don't remember enough about the show to say that Darkwing is bumbling. You could be right.
Yeah, Darkwing for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't remember him being a super likable character, but entertaining nonetheless.
See, I only remember him as being like a Batman parody.
Okay.
And that's all I really remember. In my head, I'm just picturing a Batman that's a duck.
Right. So I think because his sidekick dude, the pilot, is in the same universe as DuckTales, it kind of makes sense that this is all one universe, but I don't see a lot of crossover other than him. I don't remember Darkwing Duck ever appearing in the DuckTales shows.
I'm pretty sure DuckTales was over before this show even started.
Got it.
So I think this was 90s, and I think DuckTales was technically 80s, but we'll watch it and figure it out. We'll report back to you.
All right.
But we did have a couple of comments from some of our fans, or at least people who responded to us on Instagram. Lexa here _ said, I watched it on DVD since I wasn't around in the 90s. In parentheses, she says, I'm 18. But I absolutely love Darkwing and Gosling's father-daughter bond. Also, Negaduck is one of the best and most threatening villains.
Huey Duck 419, it's like a mega fan right there, said, I watched Darkwing Duck a ton as a kid. It was and kind of still is my favorite show. One particular one I'll always remember is Hot Spells. Gosling selling Darkwing's soul to a devil-like character really terrified me. I couldn't sleep for like a week, and yes, I watched it at night.
Wow. Okay.
I don't remember that episode.
I don't remember that.
But sounds like something I'd be into.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess we should just kind of jump into it and see what this show has to offer to our modern selves.
Okay.
Daring Duck of mystery, champion of right, swoops out of the shadows, Darkwing on the night. Somewhere some villain schemes, but his number's up. 3, 2, 1. Darkwing Duck. When there's trouble, you call me Darkwing. Darkwing Duck.
All right, we are back. We've watched a few episodes. Admittedly, we ended up watching an extra one because we kind of fell asleep during one.
It was the holiday weekend. Had a lot of turkey.
I don't eat turkey.
I had a lot of turkey.
I'm just tired. So I guess we should cover Beauty and the Beat first.
Well, before we do that, you want to just do like one thing that surprised you about the show? Or that you liked?
You go first.
One of the things I liked about the show was it was very fast-paced and frenetic, and the gab was good. There was a lot of alliteration and puns, and I'm a glutton for puns.
You're a glutton for puns.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you should bring up the gift of gab.
Why's that?
Because you didn't know why people kiss the Blarney Stone?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we were playing some game the other day, and that came up, and I just thought it was a luck thing. So, yeah.
No. You
learn something every once in a while.
Luck isn't real. I make my own luck, or lack thereof.
Okay, Harvey Dent.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it is fast-paced. That is enjoyable. There are so many puns. So like, half of this show's dialogue seems to be duck puns. You know, it's kind of like a couple of people got together, late at night when they were really tired and really drunk, and we're like, it'd be funny if you make like a duck version of that Pulp Fiction character.
Oh, the Shadow.
The Shadow.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because his name actually, I didn't realize this. As a kid, I always thought Batman. But he is very Batman-esque with his gadgets and everything. But his name, Drake Mallard, is an allusion to Kent Allard, who was the original Shadow.
The Shadow. That was from like the era of the Phantom and...
Exactly, one of those pulp heroes.
Kind of chill superheroes.
Yes.
A little more chill.
Yes. Kind of noir-y.
Yeah. And I do enjoy that a lot of the dramatic scenes, well, and it's not necessarily the dramatic scenes, it's the scenes in which Darkwing is kind of performing, because I think half of the service that he offers to people, since he doesn't really have anything together and doesn't really know what he's doing in all circumstance, is that he just puts on this performance of competence.
Melodrama.
Yeah, and it's very noir-ish, and I like that they run with that quite a bit on the show.
I agree with you on that. Shall we start getting into the episodes?
Yeah. First up, Beauty and the Beat.
So, interesting thing, just a little side note before we get into the episode. We watched this on Disney Plus, and Disney Plus has a lot of the cartoons out of order. This, X-Men, some of the other older cartoons. So we thought this was episode 1, which is why we watched it. It turns out this is actually episode 3 in terms of air dates. So our bad. Normally we watch the first episode. We didn't. So deal with it. But in Beauty and the Beat, I like this, that it's, a play on words. Almost every episode is a pun or a play on words of some famous other work, right, which I thought was pretty good. But
they live in Saint Canard.
Yep, which is French for duck.
It's very sophisticated.
So this was the first episode we watched, and I was kind of hooked right at the beginning. I mentioned that the thing that I liked was the fast kind of, just the way they spoke. So at the beginning of this, he goes, Saint Canard, there's a million stories, and I know every single one. Well, at least the most important ones. And it's just super quick.
Yeah, it's snappy.
Yeah, I really thought that was funny. And then he just starts telling the story of the first time he fought Bushroot. And basically, in a nutshell, this episode, there's this guy, I don't remember his last name, but he's a professor named Reggie. He's doing experiments to try to get ducks to be able to photosynthesize. Meanwhile, he's got some bully professors who are like, no, you need to do things that make food better because that's where the money is. And he kind of gets picked on and decides to experiment on himself. And he basically becomes a male duck version of Poison Ivy. He can control plants and make them grow fast and do things that plants can't normally do. And the whole plot around this episode is he realizes that his female colleague, Rhododendron, is actually semi-into him, so he decides he's going to kidnap her and turn her into a plant creature just like him. And Darkwing Duck has to put a stop to it.
This was actually pretty entertaining to watch because... What year was this episode?
91 is when the show started.
Okay, so this was 91, and he's talking about... he basically ends up, weaponizing photosynthesis. But in that conversation... when the other guy is kind of calling him out on it, and he's like, we should use this technology to advance food and farming. And he's like, basically,
GMOs.
Yeah, people aren't really concerned with quality. What they want is quantity.
Right.
And I'm like, wow,
It's true.
That is so, whatever it is that you feel about GMOs, I don't really care. I don't think beef DNA belongs in grapefruit, It's kind of weird.
I do.
Kind of weirds me out, and I feel like in every other scientific area, the burden of proof that it is safe is on the person developing the technology before it becomes available to the public. And GMOs, we kind of did that backwards. It's kind of like, well, let's just, use the public to test it and put the burden of proof on them to prove that it's not healthy. So, of course, there's vegetable breeding, which is one thing. But it was kind of funny that you could see this mentality, which was a villain's mentality in a cartoon in 91, and yet that's kind of how we're operating in the food industry these days.
Yeah, kind of.
It's a little disturbing.
I know you didn't like the voice actor for Bushroot.
I can't stand it.
He was kind of... I can see why you didn't like it. He was in a lot of cartoons in the 90s, but I actually really liked the self-deprecating nature of that character. So when he initially does his experiment, he basically puts a potted plant next to him on a table and then raises it up, gets struck by lightning, and then he says, he just goes on this rant. He goes, my experiment is a failure. I'm a failure. No, I'm worse than a failure. I'm scum. No, I'm worse than scum. I'm a worthless fungal parasite. But he says it just so fast, and it's kind of depressing the way he says it. It's even though the voice was annoying, I liked the performance.
Right. Yeah. The way everything progressed and how quickly it progressed, it was kind of like a demented fever dream.
Yeah.
I feel like they could have been way more subtle with it, but it really just kind of, the story developed the way it would in Twisted, drug-induced, raging sleep, or if a couple of drunk dudes were writing this at a bar.
Well, and the thing that's interesting about the writing is, even though this is a child's show, I think there are a lot of jokes in here that a child wouldn't get.
Right.
So at one point, he decides he's going to take Rhododendron and turn her into a plant creature, because at one point he overhears her talking to Darkwing Duck, and she uses his first name, Reggie, and he goes, and she says,
likes me. She really likes me.
And she says nice things about him. So when he's going to turn her into the plant creature, he says something along the lines like, "You'll be the next cover girl of Lawn and Garden." And then she goes, "I don't want to be a plant." He says, "It'll grow on you." So those are kind of the puns and everything. But, a child isn't going to know what a cover girl is.
Right.
Kind of thing. And then Lawn and Garden being obviously that kind of magazine. Like, those are not things a kid is really going to get. So I kind of appreciated that there was some, it's not risque, but, there's some adult humor in there. So if you're an adult watching this with your kid, it's not going to be completely boring and mind-numbing.
I don't think it could be boring. It's bizarre, and it's twisted, and I'm not really sure that there is a lesson to be learned from this for kids. Like, usually there's a really simple takeaway, like a moral lesson.
Right.
And with this, it's like, what on earth did I just watch?
Well, one of the things that's funny, we had a little bit of a giggle on this, but there's a point where Darkwing is riding a lawnmower, and he's like, "It's time to toss a little salad."
What on earth?
Because he was doing all these like plant puns and everything with this guy. He also says it's time to chop some salad, stuff like that. It's time to like mow the lawn. Like all these little, quips are plant-based.
Okay, whoever wrote the tossing salad line was probably just hanging out with Arnold Schwarzenegger at the time.
Oh.
Didn't realize it was inappropriate since it was being said at work.
Time to prune your little wedding plans. Like
prune your little wedding
stuff
plans.
Like that. One thing I was confused by was Darkwing's Duck lack of concern regarding...
Darkwing's Duck? I was confused by Darkwing's Duck.
I was confused by Darkwing Duck's lack of concern about killing the villain. Like, he's trying to run this guy over with the riding lawnmower, and eventually, like, he gets knocked off the riding lawnmower. It goes off of a ramp and then lands on bushroot. He appears to die. And then Darkwing starts crying like, "I was too late," because he thinks he didn't save the girl. But no concern about this dead supervillain, and then later the supervillain comes back as like a head of lettuce with like a beak on it. And he's like, "I'll be back. I just need a little water, some fertilizer."
Okay, but if their experiment went so sideways that they became plants, is it really murder if you kill a plant?
Yes.
We're getting into that little
it's sentient, though.
Moral green area.
But he's sentient.
Oh. I don't know. I feel conflicted about that.
Yeah. One other thing I liked about this episode I thought was kind of funny was Darkwing Duck is, goes to try to save the day, and he's investigating, and he says, "Oh, it must be bushroot." He was studying photosynthesis, and he probably experimented on himself, and Dr. Rhododendron says, "Are you sure it's him?" He goes, "In a word, yes. In 2 words, most certainly. In 3 words," and she interrupts him, "How do you know?" And he goes, "Because I never make mistakes." And he's playing chess with a robot and then loses when he says that. I thought that was pretty clever and funny.
They wrap themselves in poison ivy.
Yep.
Which is a interesting move.
I mentioned that he also speaks in alliteration a lot. There's one point where he says, scrupulous scientific scrutiny. Like, that's the level of dialogue we're getting, and I appreciate it. Like, it's pretty good.
Put up your vines before I dust your crops.
Exactly. That's some good pun work.
It's silly. It's, I feel like the script was a vehicle for the puns.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Someone got really high and, wrote up this rough draft, and then they're like, all right, how do I get to use all of my fun plant wordplay?
Planter.
This. I feel like I feel compelled to actually look up who wrote this episode so I know where to place the blame.
Well, maybe we should go on to the next episode.
Yeah, Quiver and Quack.
This is the one we fell asleep on.
This is the one with Negaduck.
Negaduck.
I was kind of excited when I first saw Negaduck appear, and then I don't know what happened.
So basically, in a
probably all the
nutshell,
food.
this episode, Negaduck is upset that he is no longer the, I can't remember the exact phrase they used, but basically, public enemy number one anymore. And so he decides he needs to do this big bust. And the beginning of the episode shows basically a pursuit. Darkwing is chasing Negaduck, but keeps getting blown up by bombs. Like, Negaduck just keeps throwing bombs. He ends up in a safe and then throws a bomb in the safe with Darkwing Duck. The safe blows up, and then Darkwing Duck shows up in an elevator, and then the elevator blows up. And then he gets saved by his daughter with the bow and arrow. So she ends up getting grounded for, going to fight a supervillain, and then she keeps sneaking out of the house as Quivering Quack.
Quivering Quack.
And all I remember, I fell asleep, and then I remember at the end, throughout the whole episode, Negaduck kept saying something like, bombs were on sale for 2 for 1 at the store. And then at the end of the episode, Darkwing Duck says, hey, thank you for the tip about the bombs. And then him and Gosselin just throw like 20 bombs at him. And that's the end of the episode.
St. Canard is a wild place. Like, you can just go to the bomb store and hook it up, and no one's really concerned.
No, not at all. But that was pretty much it. I have a note that says Nega gets a bunch of dogs and lets them into the museum.
Right, and then calms them down with a fire hydrant when they get unruly.
Yeah, and then this was weird. So, Darkwing Duck and Launchpad McQuaid was the guy from DuckTales, the pilot. They run and hide from the dogs in a sarcophagus, and then they come out as mummies, and the dogs immediately see them. So then they go and hide on top of a totem pole. But when the dogs come, the totem pole like disassembles, and each like spirit animal like flies or runs away.
It's kind of like if you show a robot all of the Indiana Jones movies and the Mummy movies and then a Darkwing Duck cartoon, it would write this.
It's funny because a lot of people do that, take bots, and somebody took a bot and took every Harry Potter book and had a bot learn all the Harry Potter books and then write a new book, and it's nonsense.
Yeah, this episode feels like the result of that. Sometimes we get stuff on this show that we watch, and we remember it being great as kids because to our children brains, it made sense. And then we revisit it and we're like, wow, they just needed to pump an episode out. And this is what they got.
Gosselin got eaten by a shark in this episode.
Good.
Like, so, for whatever reason, Negaduck decides he wants to go after Quivering Quack because that's the new hero.
Right.
Like, the news is covering Quivering Quack over Darkwing, so he's annoyed for 2 reasons. 1, that his daughter is disobeying him, and 2, that his daughter's more famous than him. So she goes to fight Negaduck, and there's something weird with, like, a bunch of corks filling up pipes and something like that. And then
she brings a boomerang?
Yeah, and then she gets thrown off the bridge.
You don't bring a boomerang to a bomb fight. That was your first mistake.
And then she gets, like, she does a thing where she, like, swings or something like that, and Negaduck, like, grabs the rope or the arrow and, like, throws her over the bridge. And then
doesn't he, like, shoot... Like, there's a rope attached to an arrow.
Yeah.
And he shoots it and then pulls her off the bridge.
Yeah.
And then she gets eaten by a shark.
And then she, like, immediately, like, jumps out of the shark and then it's just dangling there for a while. Like, it was really weird.
Yeah, okay. So the first episode was a drunken fever dream. This is a robot's drunken fever dream.
But I don't really remember it, so I think we should go on to the 3rd episode that we watched.
But DW gets swallowed by a shark and then she blows up Negaduck.
No, Gosselin does that. Gets swallowed by the shark. DW ends up saving her with, like, a motorcycle. And then while they're, like, jumping through the air on the motorcycle, they just throw a ton of bombs and say, thanks for the tip about the bombs being 2 for 1, and then throw bombs at Negaduck, and that's it.
I don't know. I think that Batman movie did this scene a lot better.
Which Batman movie?
The one with the bridge and the bombs.
Dark Knight Rises?
Sure. I don't know, you guys. I thought I was going to have a really good time with these episodes, and I left feeling very confused.
The first episode so far, out of these 2 episodes, I did actually really like Beauty and the Beat. I did really enjoy that episode, so...
I thought this next one was kind of fun. Fraudcast News.
Great wordplay.
Fraudcast News was good wordplay. Where did this fall in the order of episodes?
So this was towards the end. So this was somewhere in season, like late season 1. Once again, it's really confusing because there was 90-something episodes. And I read that there's 3 seasons, but on Disney Plus, it was like 67 episodes in season 1. Season 2 had 12, and then there was no season 3. So once I have no way of really knowing, and I don't care enough to look up when this actually was. But we watched one with Broadcast News, and basically in a nutshell, there's this reporter. Her name is, I forgot her name. It's something Beakley. Bianca Beakley. Bianca Beakley is concerned that her ratings aren't good enough, even though we find out just before she's complaining about her ratings that she's the #1 newscaster in St. Canard. We also find out that Gosselin is obsessed with her, and Darkwing's a little annoyed because he was always her idol, and he's not anymore. So he's a little annoyed, but we find out she's great, and then she's complaining to her like underlings that her ratings aren't good enough. So one of her underlings says something along the lines of, our best broadcaster whenever we talk about Darkwing Duck, let's just do a whole series on him. And she fires both of them and says, hey, wait a second, why don't we do, the classic bad guy thing in a cartoon? Why don't we do the thing that my underling just said? Let's do a series of episodes.
So she's like a man in a boardroom.
Exactly.
Bless her heart.
She decides to do a series of stories on Darkwing Duck, but this particular week is the villain convention in Orlando, so all the villains are gone, so there's no crime. So while she's filming Darkwing Duck, the only thing he's able to do is
What, do they get together at Epcot Center?
I guess so. But they decide to just fight like jaywalkers and parking tickets. So she realizes to make news, she needs to become a supervillain. So she becomes the Bugmaster and becomes a supervillain and goes on a crime spree. And that's pretty much the episode. There's some stuff where Gosselin pretty much immediately figures out, she goes, how come she's reporting the news, but then disappears and Bugmaster comes and she's not there? And that's pretty much it. And then
it's kind of like, how come you and Wesley Snipes are never in the same room at the same time?
So am I Wesley Snipes?
Gotcha.
What?
No, she cracks this case wide open at the very beginning.
I don't understand the Wesley Snipes thing.
So, top of this episode.
I don't even... What's going on? I'm so confused.
Nothing needs to make sense. It's Darkwing Duck. So at the top of this episode, is this the first time we see, at least in the episodes we watched, Darkwing Duck in his dad clothes?
Yes. So we see him and basically he's dressed like Doug Funny.
Yeah, he is. He's wearing like a sweater vest, no pants
khaki.
though.
Oh no pants.
I don't think he had
No,
pants.
he was wearing shorts.
Was he wearing
I
shorts?
think he was wearing shorts.
Were they white?
I think they were khaki.
That's
like Doug
weird.
Funny.
I don't know. So anyway, we see Darkwing
Duck Funny.
Oh. Wow. But as far as I can tell, it's like all that Darkwing Duck does in his spare time is watch TV with Launchpad and Gosselin. So they're, during their relaxing time watching the news, and we're cutting between this broadcast and then Bianca, what's her face?
Bianca Beakley
talking to her employees. This is a little terrifying. At the beginning of the episode, when she's in her rage, she kind of grows these pointy little teeth.
Yeah, that was weird. Her eyes turn into fire.
Her eyes are like blood red. She actually breathes fire at one point. And then it all goes away, and she's back to being kind of cute. You're like, what was she really?
That's
high?
a duck you want to... I'm just kidding.
It's just intense. It's very intense.
Well, what's weird about this, so Gosselin figures it out right away, and she goes to confront Bianca and says, hey, I'm your biggest fan, and she's trying to get evidence, and then she ends up seeing the helmet, the Bugmaster helmet, and she calls her out on it, and so Bianca says, oh, no, you see, there's not enough crime, and I'm trying to make Darkwing Duck look good, because if he's not fighting crime, then no one's going to care about him anymore, so I'm doing this just to help him out. And then Gosselin is like shrewd, and she goes, wait a second, so you're creating news to increase your ratings and manipulate your pay based off ratings? And she's like, yeah. And Gosselin's like, oh, okay, I could live with that. And then dresses up as the Bugmaster's sidekick, the Grub, and starts doing crime with the Bugmaster. And then eventually they capture Darkwing Duck, and the Bugmaster says something like, hey, be evil. And she just makes her voice, like Gosselin makes her voice evil and just starts like being crazy and crime-ridden.
So clearly this is some bad parenting. Because everyone's chill, they're watching TV. Launchpad is like, oh, I thought they were going to get off the island, which is kind of weird. It almost feels like a Lost reference, but this was too early.
Oh, they called it, what was it? It was like a play on Gilligan's Island. It was like Quackigan's Island or something like that.
So bad.
think that's what it was, Quack Against Island.
But they're like, okay, so we're done watching TV. So Darkwing Duck and Launchpad go out to fight crime. Do they just leave Gosselin at home by herself?
Yes.
Like, no wonder she's getting into trouble. She's bored and she's bratty.
So my question,
She has no clear boundaries. Is she adopted?
She's adopted. She is not his biological daughter, which is fine. You know, that's a great thing. Your parents chose you. Being adopted is not a bad thing.
It's wonderful to see two gay men raising a little girl together.
We don't know that he's gay.
It's very heartwarming.
But what does he do as a cover? Like, what is his career? How did this adoption get approved?
Saint Canard doesn't care. There's a bomb store.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a villains convention that goes to Orlando every year.
Well, most of the time Orlando's, conventions, they alternate between cities. Like, I'm sure they do Vegas one year, Orlando another year, maybe Anaheim a different year.
Anaheim's got that cheap rent. Yeah,
they can go to Disney.
Just some bad parenting. But in general, Gosselin is a raging brat. She's super rude. She has no boundaries. But part of that comes from the incompetence of her father. So really, it's just entirely his fault.
Yep, you're a bad dad.
She looks up to the newscaster. She realizes something is a little bit off. She figures out the newscaster's a villain. She's like, you know what? I'm on board with that. I think Gosselin's a little bit of a sociopath.
No, I think she's just young and gullible. Because she's like, I'm going to return everything once all the other villains are back. So I think she just wants to believe in her heroes.
She just wants to go out and beat up little old ladies.
Yep. I mean, I'm for that.
Yeah.
It's a weird episode. It was okay.
It was a weird episode. There was this one point when... What's Bianca's villain name?
Bugmaster.
There was one point when Bugmaster has, she shoots out this spider web and wraps up Darkwing Duck in that. I kind of feel like it would have been a little more fun if she was a spider.
Well, what's weird
that didn't make a lot of sense to me.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that, because there was an episode called Duckophobia, which is on Disney Plus, but it only aired once and then it was banned because Darkwing gets bitten by a spider and then grows extra arms and has spider powers. So I don't know if Fox or somebody else got upset at Disney for airing it. So they actually pulled that episode from circulation. So there was an episode where Darkwing had spider powers.
Was that before or after this?
I have no idea.
Okay.
They
were kind of they draw inspiration from many places.
There was another weird side plot in this episode where they talk about there was a cockroach mime. Is like the big event in town.
Cockroach mime.
And there's a point where the cockroach is on stage and there's a guy who's only a few seats back. It's like, why did I get such bad seats? I can't see a thing, because it's literally these human-sized ducks and then an actual cockroach the size of a cockroach on stage, so you can't see anything.
Wait, are the ducks human-sized or is everything just duck-sized?
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Is everyone in this universe a duck?
I don't know, man. But there's a point where they abduct.
Oh God.
They abduct the cockroach. They abduct the cockroach mime, Launchpad, and DW, and they're in these cuffs, and they're like, one of us needs to wiggle out to save the other, and Darkwing Duck says something along the lines that he's trained to dislocate his own limbs so he can get out of these things, and Launchpad goes, I don't know, I can't believe these duck-sized cuffs are actually holding the cockroach. And the cockroach just mimes himself, but is held in. So twice in this episode, Darkwing Duck dislocates limbs. So he dislocates his thumbs and stuff to get out of the handcuffs. And then when he's in the spider web that you mentioned, he dislocates his whole arm to get out, and then uses buzzsaw cufflinks to cut the rest of the webbing out. It's super weird.
This is weird. The deeper we examine this, the weirder it gets, to be quite honest.
And the next episode we're going to cover gets even weirder.
Speaking of, controversy and episodes getting pulled, it seems like this had its fair share.
Yeah, so just the two, Ducknophobia, and the one we're about to cover, Hot Spells, which came recommended by one of the listeners who commented. It was Huey419 or something like that.
This is third season.
Yeah, so season 3, episode 8 is what I saw online. We could not get this on Disney Plus. We did find this episode on the YouTube, and the quality was awful.
It was pretty atrocious.
It was pretty bad.
This, I think, was the most entertaining of the episodes.
I still think Beauty and the Beat was the most entertaining, but this episode was just weird. So basically, in a nutshell, Darkwing Duck is dating this duck witch named Morgana.
Duck
And they're
witch.
basically at Hogwarts. And they're trying to impress... Like, this is his first time meeting Morgana's father.
Like, how did they meet?
She's in other episodes. Like,
Okay.
as I was scrolling through thumbnails, I saw her in other episodes. So I don't know if she started as a villain or another hero or what, but he's dating this witch. And she has some presentation at the school. And they find out that Gosselin has some magical ability. They think that she could possibly learn. So she audits a class. And she's like, man, I just want to do magic because I hate school. And they're like, nope, you need to be able to do math to do magic appropriately. So she basically goes to the library of forbidden spells, and every time in the episode somebody says that, there's some music and some lightning, and then she basically sells her dad's soul to the devil to learn magic. And that's the gist of the episode.
I mean, she didn't really know that it was the devil.
She didn't, and then it turns out that because she was tricked, like one of the elder witches figures out, well, she's technically innocent. She's not the one who stole the book. And she didn't know that this was what was going on. She didn't 100% agree. She didn't know what she was agreeing. So the spell/contract's not binding. So they go to hell with a bunch of their familiars. And one of their familiars just scares Beelzebub, the devil. And then Darkwing just gets out of hell.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Darkwing's hell was sitting on a couch watching TV with his parents.
Pelican's Island.
Pelican's Island, that's what it was. It wasn't Quackigan's Island.
What it was.
Yeah, he watches Pelican's Island with his parents.
So, right at the top of this episode, they introduce the Library of Forbidden Spells. And every time they say the Library of Forbidden Spells, this music plays.
And lightning.
And they're like, is that going to happen every time we say it?
And the father basically says, yeah, it's a warning because you can lose your soul in these spells, so we have to take it seriously, or something along those lines.
Right. So what does that little brat Gosselin do? She's like, I'm going to go check out this library.
Well, no,
because she has no boundaries.
Well, no, she didn't go to do that. In fact, she actually tries to avoid it. Beelzebub pretends to be the janitor and says, hey,
moved it onto the basement.
why am I going to take up space for books that aren't being read? And then he says something along the lines of, magic is easy. You don't have to do math. The only reason they tell you have to do math is to keep the teachers employed. It's a union thing. Which, once again, a joke that no child is going to understand. Unions and teachers needing to be political to keep their jobs. And he gives her one spell, and he actually does the magic. He fakes her having magic, so she thinks she has magic, so she'll keep agreeing to do more stuff to eventually sell her father's soul for magic powers. So at the end of the episode, she actually tries to fight him with magic, and he goes, you don't have magic, that was me the whole time, you dumb beezy.
Yeah, there was even like a brief appearance from some random cross-dressing creature.
Yeah, and that's how they defeat it. It's like one of the elder warlocks familiar is just like this weird giant creature with like makeup and stuff, and it chases the devil away.
I think it was like a statement like, if you go to hell, there are cross-dressers there.
I don't think so. I don't know what it was, but it was a really weird episode, and it was banned because it dealt with like witches and the occult and the selling your soul to the devil kind of thing. It's weird that Disney even aired this in the first place.
It kind of feels like it was written by a Republican as a cautionary tale of what happens if you're into unions and stuff.
Unions are the devil.
If you dabble with witchcraft, you're going straight to hell with all those cross-dressers and homosexuals.
One of the jokes that I thought was pretty funny was Beelzebub is like sitting on like a lounge chair, and he's like, I need to get out into the world. I need to steal some souls. He thought about going to Georgia. Just kidding.
Stupid.
But he's like flipping through like a TV channel kind of thing to find a soul. So he's like, oh, used car salesman, too easy. Lawyers, too easy. And then he sees a Darkwing Duck and he's like, that's a challenge. I want his soul. But I thought that was clever. The whole used car salespeople are going to hell anyway, so he's not going to do any work to get him there.
Right. Yeah, politicians, all them.
One joke that I knew you appreciated, when they were going over how magic works, they're basically saying all magic is based off of doing potions,
right,
and then saying magic words, and there's complicated math, but if you do it correctly, and do the math right, you can do the spell, and the spells will keep for years if you put them in Quackerwell.
Quackerware.
Quackerware.
No, if you remember to burp the Quackerware.
Right. Which Tupperware burps. That's how you
Yeah.
know the real thing. Once again, a joke that most kids are not going to get. That would have gone right over my head as a kid.
Well, that would have gone right over your head like 6 months ago before I told you what burping Tupperware means.
That's not true.
Yeah, it's totally true.
Don't you ever.
You did
Robin
not have
Williams-
Tupperware growing up.
No,
I had
didn't
to
have
explain that joke to you
that's
in
true.
Aladdin. You're like,
Yeah, you did.
yeah, because he opened up a container and it made a fart noise, and he was like, "Oh, still fresh," because you burped the Tupperware. Yeah, it's weird that these jokes make it into cartoons.
Don't make me look ignorant.
This show is just bizarre. You know, one thing I really didn't like about this episode was that what's the name of the witch that he's dating? Morgana. Right away when Gosselin does a spell, she's like, "Wait a second. How are you able to do that?" And she knows right away the only way you can do a spell like that without studying is, you know, if Satan's like meddling in your stuff. So she knows right away, but the elder dude that she's explaining the situation to is just like all fine and good with everything, and he doesn't immediately register that something's off.
Well, he takes her presentation slot away and gives it to Gosselin because she says, "Oh, I found a new way to do magic."
Right.
And I've got these new theories, but yeah, it's kind of absurd.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
So, now that we've talked about a bunch of episodes, I think we, before wrapping up, kind of should have some deeper conversations about the characters.
Right.
Do you think Darkwing Duck is competent?
No.
You don't think? Because I'm torn on that. Because
He lucks into everything.
he does luck into things, but in a lot of the episodes, he's almost like a criminologist where he, like in the very first episode we watched, Beauty and the Beat, the Dr. Rhododendron says something along the lines of... Rhododendron says, "Who do you think it is?" And he goes, "Oh, it's Professor Reggie so-and-so." She goes, "You really think it's him?" He goes, "Yeah, it's based off this." And he goes through the whole things that he could not have known. He goes, based off his type of research, he was doing this. He clearly turned himself into a photosynthesizing monster. He's coming after you because he wants revenge, but he also has a crush on you. So he's going to ultimately come after you. And like, he predicted everything the guy was going to do. So like his crime, like he's at least a good detective.
I feel like he follows the basics of how his job is supposed to be done, but most of what makes people confident in him is his blind confidence in himself.
Yeah, there's definitely a fake it till you make it mentality there.
Yeah.
But I think, like, obviously it's a cartoon, he's supposed to be a buffoon to an extent, but I don't think he's a buffoon to the level of, like, you kind of compared him to Inspector Gadget at the beginning of the episode. I don't think he's a buffoon to that level. Like, Inspector Gadget's completely hopeless. Like, everything he does is an accident, or Penny walking him through what to do. This, he at least knew what he was supposed to do. Whether or not he delivered on the goods is different.
Yeah, I don't think he knows what he's doing. I think he lucks into almost everything, and it's kind of like that phenomenon of, like, if enough people think that you can do something, then they trust you.
I guess.
Yeah,
it's definitely interesting. Like, I think he's good at aspects of his job.
Yeah. It is interesting the direction that what's his name? Jim Cummings?
Jim Cummings, yeah.
That Jim Cummings took with him vocally, because it's not often that the main character of a show has such a grating voice. Usually the protagonist of the show is someone a little bit more relatable and level-headed, because people need to be able to relate, and the characters who are more heightened and a little bit obnoxious, like Darkwing Duck, usually tend to be secondary characters or comic relief.
Well, what's also interesting, Jim Cummings actually said that this was one of his favorite roles because he was able to, like, ad-lib a lot, which is weird for a cartoon because, especially for TV, you have to animate that, and it takes a long time for animation, so it's interesting that he had the freedom to do that.
Right. But, I mean, he's the boss.
Yeah, he's got like almost 600 credits.
Insane.
on IMDb. It's like 549 or something like that. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely. So the dialogue is really fun. The voice choices are a little strange. I always love hearing Launchpad.
Man, I'm blanking on his name right now.
Terrence
McGovern.
I always like hearing Terrence McGovern. He's got one of those really comforting, reassuring voices. But I also really like that character because he's the crossover character to the rest of the DuckTales world.
So speaking of the crossover, I just read an article that the creator of the show did, or an interview that he did, and he basically said, no, even though Launchpad is in both, it is not a shared universe.
That's so weird.
And he says specifically a couple different things, because the Robo-Duck in DuckTales appears in this, but he's more like Superman than Cyborg in Darkwing Duck, where he's more like RoboCop, Cyborg in DuckTales. He also, even though this series also refers to Scrooge McDuck a couple of times, not in any of the episodes we watched, but he is referred to. His biggest argument for this not being in the same universe as DuckTales is Launchpad McQuaid is much less competent in this show than in DuckTales. Apparently he was a very good pilot and very competent in DuckTales.
Yeah.
So I guess it's an alternate universe.
Got it.
Weird.
Universe where incompetence reigns supreme.
Yep.
Gosselin.
Christine Cavanaugh. Voice of our childhood. Chucky, Dexter.
All kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, she was great. R.I.P. I just really can't stand the character Gosselin.
Yeah, she was kind of annoying.
Yeah, she's got an annoying voice. She's a brat. She's disobedient. She
Petulant.
sells her dad's soul to Satan.
Becomes the villain and fights her dad.
She's kind of terrible.
Yep.
She's kind of the worst.
Hey, it's part of her upbringing, though.
Yeah, not a particularly likable character.
It's like she's like one of those people who says they don't like drama, but absolutely love drama.
Oof, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, ruined your childhood?
I mean, I didn't remember a lot of this show, but I remembered really liking it. And now it's entertaining because it's so bizarre. But I don't really like the characters.
I'm torn because I like Darkwing and Launchpad. And I definitely want to see an episode with like the guy with the electrical socket on his head. Because I vaguely remember that character.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I feel like this is not a series that I'm going to go through and watch every episode, but I think I'm going to go and cherry pick a couple more episodes because I do like the jaunty dialogue.
Yeah, the writing, the fast-paced nature of it, the puns are hilarious. But overall, it's really disjointed and kind of confusing.
I think the thing that was disappointing to me is the way Beauty and the Beast started. I would have almost liked the whole series was like that, like Darkwing is narrating the episode, talking about how the whole thing went down, because the way he presented the story, like he was reading a story and he was narrating it and all of his little jokes and the alliterations. I thought it was a very strong first episode we watched, and I don't think each episode had as good of puns or alliteration or wordplay as that first episode we watched. So I was riding high off that first episode, and I was hoping each episode would be like that, and I feel like the two middle episodes we watched weren't as good, and Hot Spells was just super weird.
Right, yeah, and also, there is a big difference. I mean, cartoons are cartoons, sure, but they're definitely made for different age brackets, and this is kind of made for younger kids, and I think that that really shows in how disjointed and full of plot holes almost everything is. Of course, if you examine any cartoon, it's going to be chock full of plot holes because, you know, you're just looking for something entertaining to drive the story forward. But it did have some really great puns and cheeky, peppy dialogue that was extremely enjoyable.
I agree.
All right. So what are we covering next?
So the Star Wars saga is coming to a close pretty soon with Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. So
is it coming to a close, or is the canon being sealed?
The main Skywalker saga is finally coming to a close.
Got it.
There will be another trilogy coming out eventually, and then we've got the Disney Plus shows like Mandalorian and an Obi-Wan series coming out soon.
And the video games.
And whatnot. So there will always be Star Wars content, but the main Skywalker saga is coming to a close. So we thought we would watch a Star Wars movie, and we figured we'd watch the one that came out in theaters as when we were children. So we figured we would watch The Phantom Menace.
Woo!
Woo!
That's about it.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Take us home, baby.
No.
Okay. Thank you for listening to Ruin My Childhood. Check out our other great podcast, Remake Rewind. Check out everything that's MDXpods related at MDXpods.com, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at MDXpods. And if you want to support the show, check us out at patreon.com/MDXpods. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.